Ida Davis first appeared in Season 8 Quagmire's Dad, and according to Seth MacFarlane, the character was heavily inspired by one of the show's writers' own experiences. Since then, she's been a recurring character, and in a town populated by jerks and idiots, Ida is one of the more morally decent people in Family Guy. She also has the complete patience of a saint when around these jerks, never getting visibly annoyed by their constant offensive questions.
Okay, you know what? Elephant in the room, I'll say it. So, Ida, you miss your penis?
So in this video, I'm going to go through the history of her character so far in the show. This is the complete timeline of Ida Davis. Her early life. Ida Davis was born with the assigned male gender and was given the name Daniel Quagmire. And in the season 17 episode Trans Fat, we find out that she grew up in the small town of Football in Texas, and during her childhood from the age of 8, she was teased relentlessly for being different and dressing quote-unquote funny. Then when she was 14, Ida realised that she was actually a girl trapped inside of a boy's body, and she buried those thoughts for the next 47 years. So perhaps in a way to forget about her true identity and engross herself in the world of men, Ida enlisted in the US Navy, and serving in the Vietnam War, she became a decorated war hero and reached the rank of Lieutenant Commander. Not only did Ida serve in the sea, but she also served in the air as a fighter pilot, owning the incredible story of ejecting from a plane behind enemy lines right on the very same day as getting a haircut. But unfortunately for us, Peter and Joe didn't hear the rest of that story because they were too busy texting each other that Quagmire's dad was ducking gay.
Put on my helmet.
Oh, sorry, that's my auto spell correct, but yeah, he's super gay.
And while there aren't any flashbacks of Ida serving in the military, we do hear some amazing stories from her fellow colleagues. According to them, she flew supplies down to Southeast Asia where many others wouldn't dare to go, and she also had the incredible ability to enter any army barracks and make every private feel important. Ida's loyalty to the military is a big reason why she didn't support Joe's son Kevin, abandoning it in Iraq.
You walked out on those men, and that's what's most unforgivable.
Ida also takes great offense when Glenn and his friends impersonate veterans in Season 16's Veteran Guy, which forces them to enlist in the US Coast Guard.
Real servicemen and women have made real sacrifices for this country.
Ida's family. Despite marrying and having kids, we don't see Ida and her former spouse Crystal ever interact. In fact, when Crystal finally enters the series in Season 13's Quagmire's mom, she doesn't even realise that her husband has gone through gender-affirming surgery.
Did you hear about your ex-husband yet? He had a procedure.
With Ida's military schedule, she wasn't around a huge amount to see the kids, and was even absent for Glenn's birth. And so this absence allowed Crystal to get away with living a very promiscuous lifestyle, cheating on Ida countless times with many different men, making a terrible impression on poor young Glenn.
You've never apologized once for the way you raised me. You're the one who made me what I am.
We can also presume that Ida is also the parent of Brenda and Gary, but sadly we don't see her interact with them either. And we haven't even seen Glenn's deaf brother at all.
Actually, I have a brother, Gary Quagmire.
But since neither were present for Ida's surgery, it could just be that they're just not very close, or she's not actually their biological parent. After all, Glenn did learn the alphabet by rehearsing all of the names of his mum's sexual conquests.
Tom, Ulf, Vic, Walter, Xavier, Yaz, and Zeke.
Her coming out. Even with the massive achievement of being a war hero and a parent, Ida still felt very miserable inside. She even pondered about ending it all, but didn't want to inflict the pain on her kids, so she finally built up the courage to get gender-affirming surgery. It's in Season 8 Quagmire's Dad where we are finally introduced to Ida, then known as Dan. Ida comes to Quahog to attend a Navy banquet honouring her service, with the plan to get her surgery afterwards. Ida has yet to tell her son Glenn about those plans, but Peter and Joe immediately suspect their friend's dad isn't quite the macho ladies' man Quagmire believes they are. However, knowing what we know now, it's here at this point in her life where Ida seemed finally comfortable to show her true self as the woman she is. Even so, without knowing this, Peter tells his friend that he believes Ida is a gay man, and Glenn immediately shoots this down as it doesn't quite match up with his own ideas of his dad, a war hero and a fierce womanizer. And while Glenn's mother was the one that influenced him to become a sexual deviant, he partially believed that he was taking after his father as the ultimate womanizer.
My dad's had more pie than Kirstie Alley.
But even still, Glenn asks Ida in the middle of the ball if they're gay, and Ida firmly denies it, but then finally reveals the truth.
But I am a woman trapped in a man's body. And while I'm in Quahog, I plan to have a sex change operation.
After announcing her true identity to her son, Ida finally sets up an appointment with Dr. Hartman to get the procedure, and the world is at last introduced to Ida Davis. Living as Ida. After her surgery, Ida finally feels more herself and is even willing to answer all kinds of awkward and uncomfortable questions from the Griffin family. And even though Ida was comfortable with her transition, Glenn wasn't. He wasn't sure if he could have her in his life at all, as he felt that he had lost his father. And depressed about potentially having her son out of her life for good, Ida went for a drink at the Marriott Hotel, where she happened upon to meet a pooch called Brian, with them hitting it off and spending the night together. When Brian returns home from a seminar, he is thrilled to have met an interesting person like Ida, who could potentially be his soulmate. That was until she informs him that Quagmire's parent had gender-affirming surgery, spent the night at the Marriott Hotel, and changed her name to Ida. And when Brian connected those dots, he wasn't too happy about it. Meanwhile, Glenn takes some time to think and accept this change in Ida's life and realizes that if she's happy, then he's happy for her.
You're my dad, and if you're happy, I'm happy for you.
What he's not happy about, however, is finding out that she slept with a dog, but not only a dog, his worst ever enemy, causing him to beat the absolute bark out of Brian. Since their one night together, they've pretty much stayed away from each other, instead trading polite but awkward chit-chat over Thanksgiving dinner.
Hello, Ida. Hello, Brian. How have you been? Very well, thank you.
That is until season 18's Brider, when Brian finally gets comfortable with dating Ida.
Should we get a room? Absolutely.
After seeing her son embarrass himself by having public sex on Shark Tank, Ida and Brian start bonding again, this time over the difficulties of parenthood. Even though Brian and his son don't talk.
How's your son, Brian? We don't talk, but Ida, you can't blame yourself.
The two rekindle their spark and spend the night together, and while Ida expects this to be just another one-night stand, Brian surprises her by asking her out on a proper date. Brian says that he's not as hung up as he used to be and asks her to be his girlfriend.
And from now on, I'm not hiding anything.
And as soon afterwards that he tells his family about their relationship, which they are very happy about.
Wow, Brian and Ida. Good for them.
But when they break the news to Quagmire, he's not a happy bunny. But despite his dislike for the relationship, Ida and Brian try to normalize it for him by doing typical family activities, like making breakfast, going to the science museum, and playing backyard football. But Glenn just can't stand Brian, and he definitely can't stand him treating him like a son.
He's not my dad! I already have a dad and it's my mom!
And so gives Ida an ultimatum. It's either him or Brian. And in a highly selfless act, Ida puts family over love and breaks up with Brian for the sake of her son. Her relationship with Quagmire. With Ida developing into somewhat of a realised secondary character, her and Quagmire's relationship grew too. Although unfortunately I have to bring up the really gross moment between them in season 12's Quagmire's Quagmire. When Glenn enters a new relationship with a woman called Sonia, who is even more kinky and more sadistic than him, she orchestrates a meeting between Ida and him to actually have sex. And while there isn't an official reason for Ida's decision to go along with this sick ordeal, we do know that it was all arranged by Glenn's abusive girlfriend.
Did you enjoy your stay at the Marriott?
No, I did not.
And despite this super gross moment that I'm very happy to gloss over, it is Ida who starts to search for her son with Peter and Joe after he goes missing. They go through Peter's garage, the Hawaiian shirt store, and the strip scene before finally finding Glenn tied up in Sonia's storage locker. With Quagmire finally free and out of that toxic relationship, it looked like things were finally back to normal in Spooner Street. Until...
My dad's pregnant with my kid.
Now, I'm not even going to speculate about this. Why don't we all collectively forget about this ever happened, shall we? Now, James, why don't we edit in that little swoosh sound and let's swiftly move on. Now, on a more wholesome note, I think Ida gave Quagmire the most treasured gift in the world. A penis. And not just any old penis, her old one. In the season 16 episode, The Unkindest Cut, Glenn's penis is bitten off by a shark, and with his personality linked to his junk, he becomes absolutely miserable, until Ida gives him her old one, and that meant that all normality was restored in Quahog.
Weird. Proud of you guys, but weird.
While Ida's appearances in the series mostly focus on her relationship with Quagmire, she also has standalone moments that attempt to represent some experiences of the trans community. In season 17's Trans Fat, Peter Griffin notices the perks of being trans and decides to identify as transgender. But things get real when he knocks himself into a coma and undergoes surgery while unconscious. And when his life falls apart after getting the surgery, Peter runs to Ida, who informs him of what her trans experience really was all about.
It took me 47 years from that day to officially own who I am.
Years and years had been dedicated into truly coming to terms with who she was, and this actually made Peter, of all people, think for the first time.
It just took becoming a woman to make you a better man.
And Ida even helped to start a crowdfunding effort to restore Peter's lost PP.
Look at that, you're up to 6 inches. That's 2 inches past your goal.
As I mentioned at the beginning, the character of Ida was apparently inspired by one of the show's writers' own experiences. In an interview, Seth MacFarlane said, actually, that episode was written by Steve Callahan, a writer on Family Guy, who had the same experience with his own parent, where his father had transitioned into a woman. And he was writing in many ways from his own experience. In Family Guy fashion, a show that is renowned for its offensive, crude humour, there have been many trans jokes made at Ida's expense, but this is something in particular that the show's writers have come to regret. This is because in 2019, the producers announced that they'd be phasing out jokes about the LGBTQ+ community, just to backpedal on this decision only a year later. The response to how the writers have handled Ida from those in the LGBTQ+ community have been mixed at best, especially as there is so little trans representation in animated shows. But if you want to read about how real trans people feel about this character, then I've left a couple of links down below from the LGBT subreddit, as well as the Ask Transgender subreddit, where people have written about their views on Ida and her first episode. So please check out those if you're interested in hearing from a real trans person's perspective. And therefore, that's the timeline of Ida Davis so far. A life that was truly unhappy for most of it, but thankfully she's finally herself and living her golden years at last.